Hello, and welcome to Group 2's presentation on modern DDoS attacks, focusing on UDP flooding. My name is Alexander Lotz, and I'm joined by Autumn Klein, Sergio Hong, and Harrison Gibson. In today's presentation, we'll begin with a brief reminder on what a DDoS attack is and a few notes on different attack categories before we discuss the specific function and purpose of a UDP flood attack. Afterwards, we'll share information on recent DDoS attacks involving UDP flood and provide you with information on how we can defend against these attacks in the future. A DDoS attack is a means by which an individual or group seeks to use multiple devices to overwhelm a server or network. These devices are usually Internet of Things devices, such as IP cameras, various connected appliances, and home routers, that have been afflicted by malware, allowing them to be controlled by the attacker. The attacker's targets may vary, but the goal is constant: to create a denial of service to users by exhausting the victim's resources, blocking legitimate traffic. DDoS attacks can take many forms, but broadly fall into one of these three categories: application layer, protocol, and volumetric attacks. Application layer attacks, also known as Layer 7 attacks, generally look to exhaust server-side resources and can be very difficult to defend against, as they closely resemble traffic from regular users. These attacks include HTTP flood attacks, which usually overwhelm the server with resource-intensive GET requests, and low and slow attacks, which send large HTTP headers to the victim as slowly as possible, forcing it to waste time waiting on the incoming data. Protocol attacks target layers 3 and 4 of the OSI model and seek to consume server resources to interrupt service. Popular methods include the ping of death, though now outdated, which sent ICMP packets larger than the victim's maximum accepted packet size to slow and overwhelm its systems, and SYN floods, which exploit TCP by creating numerous half-open connection requests, leaving the victim waiting for connections that will never complete. Lastly are volumetric attacks, which, as the name implies, attempt to overwhelm the victim by the sheer volume and quantity of data, consuming the victim's available bandwidth if successful. Volumetric attacks occur through a wide variety of methods, including DNS amplification and ICMP flood. The former makes DNS requests with large DNS responses while masquerading under the victim's IP address, causing the victim to be inundated with the lengthy DNS responses. The latter uses the same protocol used by the ping of death attacks, ICMP, but this time simply overwhelms the victim with the sheer number of requests produced by the botnet, rather than sending particularly large packets. Another method, and the focus of our discussion today, is UDP flood. UDP flood attacks capitalize on weaknesses in the connectional structure of UDP. Generally, when a UDP packet is sent to a destination, the server first verifies that the target port is open and has programs running that can receive the packet. If this is not the case, the server sends back an ICMP packet to show the destination was unreachable. In a UDP flood attack, compromised devices send multiple UDP packets to the target under a spoofed source IP address and force the victim to become overwhelmed from attempts to process the packets and send ICMP responses. The spoofed IPs make it difficult to thwart attackers that could otherwise be blocked by IP address, and further complicate attempts to identify the offender. The flood attack heavily taxes the target's server resources and leaves it sluggish or unresponsive to normal traffic, but it also exploits a second important weakness. Stateful firewalls monitor incoming traffic to determine which packet should be permitted between hosts for the duration of their connection, but UDP is connectionless. Instead, the firewall stores the host relationship information in a state table for a set amount of time. The large influx of UDP packets from a high volume of sources can oversaturate this firewall state table, causing it to block legitimate connections instead.
Unlike most other DDoS methods, a UDP flood attacks random ports to overload a system rather than attacking one specific part. It doesn't need an initial handshake from the victim system to start an attack. All UDP attacks use a higher level protocol to generate data for an attack. A UDP flood takes minimal resources to set up, is highly effective, and can also be set up to be anonymous, making it a very common form of DOS attack.
DDoS attacks are on the rise. In 2019 alone, there were over 8.4 million DDoS attacks, Every single day, 23,000 DDoS attacks occur. Every single minute, 16 DDoS attacks are attempted. There was a particular spike in attacks this past March when a huge remote shift was seen for school and work-related activities due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Here are a few well-known DDoS attacks. In 2018, GitHub was hit by an amplification DDoS attack. The attackers overwhelmed GitHub's memcache servers using a spoofed version of GitHub's IP address. At first, GitHub was able to handle the attack on their own, but they soon had to bring in a company for help. The attack lasted a total of 8 minutes. In 2016, an Internet of Things attack disrupted over 80 major websites such as Netflix and Amazon. They did so by attacking the DNS provider Dyn. The attackers used malware to build a huge botnet of devices to overwhelm Dyn with requests. The aftermath of this attack was devastating, as it cost Dyn over $110 million and led to over 10,000 domains leaving their services. This attack lasted just one day. In 2000, major websites such as CNN and eBay were down due to an attack made by somebody who went by the name of Mafia Boy. Mafia Boy took over university networks and overwhelmed websites with traffic. It was soon revealed that Mafia Boy was a 15-year-old high school student. These attacks brought to light just how vulnerable our networks are. If an amateur high schooler can cause that much damage, imagine how much chaos an organized professional attack could cause.
To increase the impact of UDP flooding, systems will likely put a cap on the response rate of the ICMP packets, in hope of preventing attacks previously mentioned, like the ping of death. However, this has a drawback. By enforcing this limitation, systems become vulnerable to lose real packets that are not a part of the attack. Deep Packet Inspections, or DPI, is a type of sniffer that inspects data in detail that is being sent over a network and takes action of blocking, logging, or rerouting the data. This method is often used to check for malicious codes, censorship, and much more, basically to ensure the data is in the correct format. A research made by Zhuangzi University in Taoyuan, Taiwan, describes a method to control the flooding of UDP. As they mentioned on their research, they said, our experiment can be divided into two phases. First, consider a bunch of simple UDP packets transmitting to the switch. This may trigger the UDP flooding attack. Then we began to do the code implementation on the simulated switch and control, and evaluate the performance and security of our defense mechanism. At the end of the results, showed that the method caused much less delay than other solutions that will incur significant delay.
It is vital that we arm ourselves against DDoS attacks. One way to prevent DDoS attacks involves intrusion detection systems. These systems use machine learning techniques to find and categorize attacks. There are two types of intrusion detection systems. The first is a host intrusion detection system, which works on a singular device to prevent attacks. This type of system is applied to every individual node. The second system is called a network intrusion detection system. Counter to the first type, it is applied to the entire network and finds issues from the whole network instead of just a singular device.
To wrap up our presentation, we have 3 questions. Number 1, after watching this presentation, do you feel as though you are vulnerable to a DDoS attack? Number 2, how do you believe that we can best prevent DDoS attacks? And finally, number 3, how can we disincentivize DDoS attacks from occurring in the future? On this slide, you can see the resources that we used to create this presentation, and with that, our presentation has come to a close. Thank you so much for watching, and we're excited to discuss the questions with you in the comment section.